Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Travis McGann. I work for Microsoft and I'm part of the Azure Global Black Belt team. I'm here today to introduce you to Craig Fulton, who is the Infrastructure and Cloud Director for Telstra. And Craig's going to take us on the journey that Telstra's gone through to get to the cloud. But firstly, what I'm going to talk about is just a little bit about the history of the partnership between Microsoft and Telstra. Right, and then we're going to get into the guts of this. And at the end of it, hopefully one of my other colleagues is going to join us, and we're just going to do a bit of an open forum where you guys can ask questions. We'll have some questions just about what Microsoft is seeing, and then getting a customer view. So the partnership between Microsoft and Telstra has been in place for a very long time. Our relationship started, I think it would be fair to say, Craig, as a Microsoft trying to sell stuff, right, to Telstra. Telstra resisting, and finally we started coming together, and that's the way sales relationships typically work. What we've seen over a period of time, though, there's been certain trigger points in this relationship that have formed us to transform the way we go to market. The first one, I think, would have been when we introduced BPOS, or Office 365, into the marketplace. At that point in time, Microsoft and Telstra came together not just as customer and vendor, but partner, reseller, right? And Telstra was a really big part of the growth of Office 365 in Australia, right? And we've been really proud of that relationship for a long time. The next big trigger point happened probably within the last 12 to 18 months, right? Which was Azure, right? When Telstra started to adopt Azure and they started to think about how do we get on the journey, right? How do we go and transform ourselves to make cloud part of our business? Theodore Roosevelt. Nothing in the world is worth having or worth doing unless it means effort, pain, and difficulty. For those of you that are customers in the room, prospective customers, we know getting to cloud is not easy. Right? We know there's challenges, and we have great partners that will help you get there. But this is the other reason Craig's going to be talking to us today, is to talk to you about the pain points that were uncovered by Telstra that also facilitated that journey. So at this point, I'll bring Craig up, or he's here already, relaxing. And you can read a little bit about what who Craig is and where he's been. Most recently, though, as a big supporter of Microsoft in Telstra, right, and delivering Azure. So I wanted to kind of lead this in with a question to Craig, is, what were the key internal trigger points that initiated Telstra to start evaluating public cloud? And how would you answer that, Craig?
So the reason we started to move to public cloud was because we weren't really seeing the benefit of the hardware that we were building. We spent a large amount of money, including building our internal cloud. We spent a large amount of money just lifecycling hardware. And by the time we lifecycle the hardware, it's time to lifecycle the hardware again. And we needed to get out of that so we could spend the money on the value add, the products, the business type products. And that was really the driver to say, there are much bigger companies globally doing this. They've got the economies of scale that we could never have. We're big in Australia, but we're obviously not the size of Microsoft. And we don't have the number of data centers. We don't have that purchasing power globally. So how do we get the advantage of some of the layers and the stacks without getting into that pin in the bridge? We're pinning the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We get to the end, we start again, because that's what we were in, and we were wasting money, to be honest. There was no value, no IP. Anyone could do it, any hardware provider. It just didn't make sense. So how do we get some speed and agility? How do we stop building the tin because there's no IP in it? And to be fair, we as Telstra weren't building it anyway. We were employing an SI to build it for us. So it's not like we were even doing that work. So why wouldn't we just take that out and use the model that was driving the economies and the size? So that's where we started the journey. It was really, and we'll come on to the different parts of the journey, because some of it is pure life cycle. We just didn't want to spend money on hardware. Other parts are the nice, new, agility, speed to market, and all the stuff that everyone likes to think cloud is. Right, now I just need to work out the technology. Which button switch? Wow.
There you go.
I'm a quick learner. Okay, so these are the three things I wanted to talk about. The vision for digitizing your business. So take the business angle. I don't know what your roles are, but from a business angle is, how do you get the money? How do you prove to someone you're going to improve the business? Whichever business you're in, even technology business, how are you going to differentiate? How are you going to cope with the startups that are greenfield, can build from scratch, can be really agile, can use some of those microservices and build things really quickly, get them to market really quickly, and you've got legacy. Most people do. The journey that we took to monetize IT, so one of the things I should probably say about my role is I sit in the IT organization, but I'm accountable for the engineering of the products for cloud as well, from the infrastructure up to the software. And that was a strategy that we took forward because we wanted to drink our own champagne. It wasn't really working that way. The only way to get it to work was to bring all the engineering teams together. And we brought about 3 engineering teams. We had a media team, an internal IT team, and we had a go-to-market cloud team. And we brought all that engineering together. So we build something once and we use it ourselves. If we don't use it ourselves, why would our customers need it, particularly for an enterprise? It became obvious we're one of the largest enterprises in Australia, so if we need it, someone else probably does. If we don't need it, then we have to question ourselves to why we're building it. And the other thing is constructing the connected cloud. So anyone that's followed us around some of our multi-cloud strategy, we don't just partner with Microsoft, we partner with what we say are probably the biggest cloud providers in the world. And we picked each of them for a different reason. They can all do more, but we had a reason that we picked each of them. Specific workloads, specific niche areas that they're really, really good at. And it gave us choice. And it gives our customers choice as well. And obviously all that connected with high-speed networking. We've got really low latency between ourselves and Azure. Some of the other clouds are actually sitting in a data center, so even better network latency. Sorry, the slides are a bit slow. Okay, so from a business perspective, here are some of the things. These are the questions that we asked ourselves and that you should ask. So, what is the value proposition? Why are you doing this? What's your goal? Are you just moving to cloud because the board told you? Are you moving to cloud because it's a buzzword in the industry? Why are you moving? There has to be a good reason for it, and there has to be a good commercial and business reason for it. It's not technology for technology's sake. How does cloud change your delivery method? So if you do what you did yesterday in the cloud, it's actually going to cost you a lot of money. And you're going to lose a lot of opportunities. So don't do what you did yesterday in the cloud because it's going to cost you more. And it's not going to give you agility, and it's not going to help in any way. It's just going to make a mess of your environment. Costs. How do you simplify cost and drive innovation? Again, when we started this journey, everyone said, great, it's going to be really cheap going to cloud. And the view was, that's not the point. The point is not the cost. Yeah, there are some benefits in some areas for cost, but it's the agility. It's how quickly we get to market. So it's not the obvious cost of VMs are cheap. It's the cost of we can get to market quicker, we can drive agility, we can get our business outcome quicker. So the big project teams you had don't need to be as big and be around as long, and you can drive more through it. So that was the cost aspect. So I tried to avoid the cost part because I don't want to be in a price war with Amazon saying how cheap I can get things when they're not like-for-like comparisons. Customers, channels, and relationships. So how does the cloud enhance your customer need? So that, from us, from a service provider, it's pretty obvious. From other industries, it's not quite so obvious, but it should be, because it is back to that. You can deliver capabilities quicker. Almost every company now has got a technology that sits in front. You can buy that technology off the shelf. You can build that technology yourself. You can use microservices, APIs. Most of the clouds have got a catalog full of things that if you know how to put them together well, then you can drive real benefit and advantages. And the benefits, how do you expand the benefits to your business? And how do you explain that? How do you explain you're actually getting benefit from the technology? So, value proposition. It's a key enabler for competitive advantage. If you don't do it, someone else will. They can do it out of the garage quite often. A lot of the banks are seeing that with some of the payment gateways. They're seeing that with some of the loan companies. 5, 6 people with some money can start giving out loans over the internet using social media to do your credit rating. They're doing that globally and often without a banking license. So no overhead, no major headquarters building with an overhead, no company cars, no sales, no investors. It's pretty easy to do, and that's just one example. There's lots of companies doing the same. So if you don't do it, someone's going to do it to you, and you need to think about how you change the company that you've got to be that agile. Partners, resource activities, so the scalability. It's easy to get scalability now. No longer do you have to buy equipment, plug it together. Now, it's not as easy as people think. You press the button and everything happens, but it's cheap to get started. And once you're started, you might bring it back in-house. You might change the way you do it. You might do hybrid cloud because it's a cheaper option. But the critical part is anyone can do this with the right skill set and the right mindset. And what we're finding is the grads we're getting out of university can do this stuff, hit the ground running as soon as they arrive. So they've got it. They can deliver things a lot quicker than some of the people we've had for 20 years. Their mindset is different. They've grown up with this. They're using these tools. All they're necessarily lacking is the good idea or the focus to say that's where we want to concentrate our business. Channels and relationships. It's easy to become a global company because you can have a global presence really easily because the clouds are connected. They're connected often with free networking, high-speed networking. So as a networking company, that's a bit of a concern for us that some of these clouds have got high-speed backbones that don't need to pay for Telstra to provide that. So we need to change in some of the ways that we're doing things as well and compete with that market. The benefits of transforming your business through things like microservices. So you don't need developers developing each individual component completely custom. You take the building blocks and then you layer your IP and your capabilities over the top. So you can get to the same place quicker because someone's already done the work. You just need to know how to integrate that. So for me, we're having less people, but smarter people. So before, all the stuff that had no IP, why would we do that? If we can move that workforce and get them to do the smart things and how we plug these things together to give us real business advantage and layer on the top of that, that's where the power of the cloud is coming. And technology is the product. Most businesses, a bank is no longer a bank. A bank is a technology company that happens to do banking. So those are the kind of thought processes that we need to think about going forward. So again, if we look at this chart, defining a cloud-first strategy. So these are some of the steps that we took to start our journey from an internal IT solution to start using our go-to-market cloud solution. And what we found out from that is it's really quite different selling IaaS services from being an IT shop trying to put your workloads onto that IaaS service because we didn't necessarily sell what you have today. So in Telstra, when we built our hybrid cloud internally, we had about 50 services that we had to connect it to. That was the hard part and the part that cost money. So some of the things we're trying to think about, and the reason we're doing a lot of this is, if we do it, we can blueprint it, we can give it to you, and you don't need to think about it again because we've done it. Now, you might choose different tools, but fundamentally, we know you have to have integration into some kind of CMDB, into ticketing system for service assurance, monitoring systems, etc. So we're trying to build that capability to say, you can have it in a box, we can give it to you, and which pattern would you have for which clouds? But you know you've got to have it, and not many IT shops are that different. How they do it, tools, yeah, but you shouldn't really care about that. You should care more about the outcome and the business outcome. So converged development and operations. So this is an interesting one. So this is the sort of most overused term in the industry, the DevOps, RunOps, whatever you want to call it. But what we are seeing is we're an engineering team, but the way that we're developing certainly our cloud products, we've got a service creation team that spins up products really quickly. So in a couple of weeks, we'll work out what the product is, and that could be technology, it could be anything. Once we've got it spun up, we accelerate it by handing it over to the delivery organization. We also are a team that can operate this. We still have a separate ops organization, so we're looking at virtual teams to begin with. We're split into an ops area, an IT solutions area, and a network area. We're trying to converge them by having virtual teams to begin with, because it's a big jump from going individual teams to completely DevOps, one team does everything. And again, back to the infrastructure space, I had someone tell me that Agile and DevOps, you don't need to worry about it because it's like electricity. You plug into the power station, the electricity provider gives you electricity, you just need to plug in. Unfortunately, we're one of the power providers. We are one of the electricity companies, so we still need to care about capacity and to an element, some of the infrastructure. The other one is adapt to financial and sourcing practices. So when you start using some of the clouds, you have to make some hard decisions around investments that you made in the past. Not all of your licensing agreements are going to be applicable for the cloud. Not all companies allow portability into the cloud, so you have to look at, do you stop paying things like software assurance, type models, for a period of time that allows you an investment to then move? Do you just write off the cost of perpetual licenses because you have to pay for them in the cloud? We came across all of these when we looked at our workloads. Some license agreements don't allow us to run on equipment that we don't own. Some don't allow us to run on equipment we don't manage. There's parts of all of that. Some of our legal requirements we have to change in contracts to allow us to run things on clouds that don't belong to us, not necessarily in our data centers. We've got a commitment to customers around keeping data in Australia for certain customers. We have to be cognizant of that. We spent a lot of time making sure that data didn't leak outside of Australia for customers that didn't want it to. So if we put customers on public cloud, how do we manage that? So don't underestimate that. The other thing is we're a very capital-driven company, as most telcos are. So moving from capital-driven to an OpEx model is no mean feat for a company where you drive a lot of capital costs and depreciation and then move them to an OpEx pay-as-you-go cost. It's easy for us from a go-to-market. From an internal IT point of view, it's a lot harder. Most of our money is capital. We're very project-driven. Moving to OpEx is a completely different model. The other thing is obviously lifecycle. Now we have to lifecycle because cloud providers won't let us run on old equipment because there's no economies for them in allowing us to use old equipment. So we have to get a commitment to lifecycle as we go. We can no longer say we'll sweat the asset for 10 years because the cloud provider won't let us. So for us, again, it wasn't the cost was cheaper. It smooths some of the cost over the period of time. We know over a longer period of time, it's probably cheaper to buy the equipment, but it smoothed our costs. And the cost saving came in how we manage the workloads. If we can spin them up and spin them down for some of the web-type workloads, if we know that we've got processing at certain times and we can use that and cut back, that's where some of the cost savings even that out. And the other thing is, if we don't lifecycle things, our OpEx costs go up anyway because we go into extended support and those kind of things. So it's not a simple equation to work out whether you're saving or whether it's a better operating model, but our view is it's a better operating model for us to keep evergreen and continue to evolve. We had to change some of the thinking. So we had a new executive director come in, and one of the first things he said to the team when we started this journey was, think like a startup and think how a venture capitalist would look at your company and make the tough decisions that they would, because if you don't change and you die, that's what's going to happen. The venture capitalist is going to come in, they're going to buy a part of your company, and they're going to carve out the bits that make money, and they're going to sell off or get rid of the bits that don't. So we might as well do that ourselves. Rethink the customer journey. Everything has to be outcome, customer-focused, not technology build-focused. So if you come at it from what's the value to the customer, whether that be an internal customer, an end customer, then you're on the right track there because you're actually building stuff that people want. And expand your reach through channels and partners. Now, this can mean many things to many people, but the channels and partners for us is obviously we have a huge channel. We've got lots of partners. We leverage our partners. We don't have the IP to do everything, so we pick the people who have. Where it's not our niche, we pick the right partners. In our businesses, we ask the right people the right questions. part of us becoming one team was we're the buyer of these services that we sell. So if we're not going to buy them, then there's a bit of a sanity check there for us. So coming on to multi-speed IT. So this is the bimodal IT, and I think it's trimodal, because when we looked at what we were going to migrate from a cloud perspective, we looked at our legacy. So we've got large risk-based platforms, huge amount of storage, our CRM type systems, our general ledger type systems. We've got about 30 to 40 petabytes of storage under management. Some of those systems just don't make sense to move to the cloud as it stands today. And if we did, we'd be kidding ourselves and it'd be a managed service. So what we're looking at there is, how do we do the things that we should always have done around automation? How do we make it cheap to operate? How do we ensure that when that 9 to 10 year life cycle of replacing some of those systems, we look at that point to say whether there's a SaaS-based system that we'll move to? And the other part comes to the cloud native, where for our CRM system, potentially we keep the back-end CRM system we have today, where we do 6 monthly, quarterly releases, and we use that as a system of record, and we put an API gateway in, and we use one of the SaaS products, Salesforce as an example, as our system of engagement. It gives us the agility in the SaaS model at the front end, but we've still got the comfort factor in the legacy at the back end that was built to last. And it takes us longer to change that, but we need less changes there. So when I look at the classic enterprise, monolithic, bespoke, again, I don't think we're different to most large companies there. And we're not going to get the billions of dollars to migrate that to the cloud overnight. So that's one of the ones where put it there, keep it up to date, refresh it, but make it as effective as possible to manage. The cloud optimized is where we kind of started, where we've got large estates of Hyper-V, VMware, KVM. So how do we take some of those workloads where the hardware is becoming end of life, and how do we get some of the benefits of some of the scale-up clouds? So how do we do a lift and shift to do step one with a view to, at some point when we refactor them, they'll become cloud native. But it gets us out of that refreshing. It allows us to re-architect some of our networking. It allows us to bring in some of the new practices. But it's not transforming the application, because again, that's a large number to transform every app into a cloud native application. So we do see a benefit in doing that, and I think that's been quite contentious with some of the partners we have who've said, no, you shouldn't do that. But at the scale we have, we've really got no choice. And then we've got the cloud native. So how do we build a software strategy that means that we're actually building to cloud native, containers, elasticity, API driven for the future? So we're not building the apps we built yesterday, we're building the apps for the future. And every new app we build should represent that, and we can reference the legacy systems using the APIs and API gateways as more the system of record and legacy. So that's really the way we've taken our workloads. The one on the left, just make it cheap to operate, automate as much as we can. The other two look to how we move them to clouds, and potentially they're different types of cloud. So then where did we go? Slow boat to China by the looks of that. Okay. So our cloud migration program. So we started a program. So with all of these strategies, the only way to get anywhere is to start. So we started by looking at our workloads and just moving things to the clouds that we thought were best to move to. And the real reason for that was to wake the organization up to this is happening. So we did a 3-month sprint that effectively said, we've picked 300 workloads, we're just going to move. And we're going to move them, we're going to spin them up, we're going to test them, and we're going to test some new technologies when we do it. We're going to test with migration technology, and we've tested a few migration technologies. The other thing we're going to do is we've tested some new technologies around cloning and cloning whole environments. And part of that was cloning whole environments, 1, to migrate, 2, for our testing, where we can spin up environments within hours, shut them down. And the third part was from a DR resilience point of view. So not necessarily have 2 hot or hot-cold sites, but have one hot site and be able to spin something up really quickly if the RTO was within hours rather than minutes. So if it didn't need to be highly available and resilient, then we looked at cloning technology. How quickly could we take a whole environment, have it cloned, and spin it up in one of our clouds? Our process that we took was, number one, when we're looking at migrating an app, can we decommission it? Is it still valid? Can we migrate functionality? Number two was, can we migrate to SaaS? Can we go straight to a SaaS app? Do we need to touch the app and move it to cloud? And then three was, can we move it to a go-to-market cloud, and which one? And then four was, we still have an internal cloud that we spun up as part of our hybrid cloud model. That would be our final resting place for apps that we didn't think would fit in any of our public clouds. So the technology resilience, so this was trying to use cloud to be either fully resilient across clouds or as a DR site for a lot of our business critical applications. So in phase one, that's pretty much what I've talked through. We did a migration proof of concept. We moved VMs, not whole workloads, other than the cloning technology. And now we've realized that's a mistake, that's too hard. If we move one VM at a time, we're going to be here forever. So we need to look at whole environments and see which environments make sense to move in one go. It's harder to plan it, but it's more effective, and it's the only way we're going to get anywhere. Our test case validation. So when we move it, who's going to test it? Who's going to make sure it works? Who's going to confirm that what we did is still valid and we haven't broken any of the things around security, PII, interfaces, all of the things that we obviously need to keep working on. Phase two was more around get a bit smarter around workload selection, around availability, cost, security, which apps would move where, how the interface, how we use multi-cloud, not just single cloud, and get the best out of each cloud. If one is more an API-driven elastic cloud, do we put our web workloads there? Some of the clouds we have are more scale-up, automated, more traditional environments. Do we still put our databases there because we've still got traditional databases? Do we move to more modern database technologies? Workload selection was, again, is taking our whole CMDB, looking at the attributes of the workload, and then overlaying it with, we actually built a dynamic tool that you ask the right questions and it comes out with, here are the clouds that make sense for you to move the workload to. Workload blueprints. So the other thing, back to the technology part of, if I move the workload, how do I monitor it? How do I secure it? How do operations see it in the end-to-end workflow? How do I patch it? How do I ensure that it's still got antivirus, it's still got IPS, someone's still monitoring security? All of those things where let's build the tenancy blueprints that say every tenancy we spin up has to have these attributes. We're not going to pick the technologies because each cloud might have its own and we might choose to use the native ones. And that's a move away from where we were before, where we were told to use certain tool sets. So you must use this tool set for this. Now we've gone to more requirements. What is it you actually want to get from us? Is it a trap? And if it's a trap, do you care how you get it? As long as the interface and the technology you use is right, we'll send that trap. And as long as you can consume it, don't tell us what technology, because we want to use as much of the cloud native technologies that sit on each of the clouds as possible. The orchestration, provisioning, and capacity management. Again, how do we do that in the cloud? It's a change to what we do today. How do we make sure that we either automate it or where we've got the scale up in that sort of middle tier, we still got a view of the capacity. We understand how we increase it. We need to make that a really simple model, and it's obviously OpEx driven, so we don't have the same view of, we know how much capital is, we know how long it takes us to spin it up. Then we're moving on more to the process selection and the benefits monitoring workload blueprints. So get out of the infrastructure space, start looking at some of the common attributes in our applications and work out how we put them in the cloud, how we monitor them in the cloud, how we ensure that we've built them in the right way. And then cutting over the apps, patterns, and automation. So do we go down the patterns route? Do we spend the time creating patterns for applications when the reality is the patterns are often quite vanilla, and we need to go over the top and then configure them anyway. How much time do we spend on scripting that? Because how repeatable is it? So where do we take it up to the repeatable part, and then it's custom after that? So this chart tries to show where the effort is in the migration journey, where, as you can see, year one and the majority of the effort is in the enablement. The blueprints, getting everything ready, setting up the tenancies, making sure it's easy when the application teams come along that they can start looking at the application components rather than having to worry about infrastructure or platform or network integration or any of those things. It's already built into the ecosystem. They just need to look at how they put the platform. The design components and the architecture blueprints. The reason architecture gets bigger is because it's moving out of the infrastructure architecture into the application-specific architecture, and how we build the apps going forward that take into account the attributes of an elastic cloud. So how do we spend more time on that architecture rather than building infrastructure? And then obviously the execution, we start off small, and most of the large customers we have seem to start off with a couple of 100, 300, they pick VMs, they pick workloads, and then their view is dev test generally first, and then they look to scale up from there. And this is saying the same thing, learn fast, and then scale up. So the other thing that we needed to look at, and this is was around the business. How do we get the business on board with this? Why do they care? What are the benefits for them? And also looking back to the workload selection. It's key we pick the right workloads that give us business benefit. And some of the new workloads the business get quite excited about because they're buying off the shelf, cloud enabled, straight from the clouds, and they can spin it up quite quickly. They can pocket really quickly, and they can see whether it's the right application for them. We don't need to build stuff. We don't need to spend a lot of effort doing that. We obviously have to look at some of the tooling and process, which I think I've pretty much covered. The process part was kind of key because a lot of our processes were driven around physicals, then virtual, scale up. So we still had a lot of operational processes that are not well suited to it not necessarily being on a cloud that we own. Everything was very much we owned all the technology. Security is a different model. There has to be a bit of trust there. You have to look at more the contractuals around security rather than you control everything. So there has to be a level of trust up to a layer that the cloud provider can provide the right level of security for you. And how you do that, whether that's the regular audits, whether they provide that to you, whether they've got security accreditations, whether you visit them. There's a good ASD paper on here are all the things you should look for in a cloud provider. Here are the security controls. So it's a different mindset. And for a lot of traditional security people, it's a bit confronting that you don't own everything and you can't touch everything and you can't lock it and it's not in your rack and in your data center. So that's obviously a thing we had to work on. Obviously, as Telstra, I had to talk about network connectivity. But in this one, I feel this is a good story for us, even outside of our IP MAN network, because we have a number of these clouds in the same data center. So our own cloud that we've built and a couple of the other clouds are in our data center. So you can start to use some of those scale-up clouds with some of those scale-out clouds in the same data center, no latency, no charge within the data center. And then when you burst out into some of the other clouds and you get the global reach, the latency, there's hardly any latency, and that is using automation, and we'll come on to some of the demos of some of the automation that we have to automate those connections, and then you get high-speed connectivity into those larger enterprise clouds. Operate models. So again, this is one that we haven't completely solved, and we're doing it in pockets. So we have the ops guys who still do the deployments, sitting with the dev teams, doing deployments. Certainly in some of our newer technology areas like media and digital, we have a complete DevOps containerized model deploying infrastructure as code type solutions all the way back to we've got the legacy large releases. So we're slowly moving there. We're doing it in the newer areas because it was obviously easier to do that, and we're trying to bring that back into the more traditional areas with more continuous delivery for legacy. Licensing. So licensing was one of the biggest things that stopped us migrating workloads, either because it was old licensing models, our legals weren't right, we weren't entitled to port the licenses, we didn't own the environment, so there wasn't the right construct from a licensing agreement for some of the vendors. And also learning that we had to put certain portability rights in every new contract we signed to ensure that as we move forward and we sign new contracts, it takes into account that there is something called cloud. Now, I'm sure when they come up the next time, there'll be something new, and we'll need to take that into account. But there is a different mindset. A lot of the big vendors are only now starting to get on board and realizing if they don't change the licensing model, then people are going to move away from them. People are starting to take the jump, whereas 3 years ago, people were a bit nervous. Now it's starting to happen, and we're seeing some of that in the licensing agreements that some of our large vendors are actually coming to us with, this is how we can enable you onto our cloud systems. And financial treatments. We worked on the OpEx model. How do we flip from CapEx to OpEx? But we also worked on how do we have a CapEx model that still allows us to use cloud, which obviously doesn't give us all the benefits, but allows us to use public cloud by dedicating some of it to us, and you can still capitalize that. It's still a capitalizable model. So what's the best model for us? The best model is obviously we can spin up and we can shut down for the right workloads. Some workloads we know they're going to be consistent and they're just going to grow. So the right model for the right workload. And that's not an easy one either. That's a lot of work to work through that. Okay, so accelerating adoption and looking ahead. So looking ahead was something put in, and I'll come on to some of the demos, but as we spend a bit of time with a lot of our vendors in the US, we go to their research labs, and some of the common trends everyone talks about. Silicon Valley seems to be a self-perpetuating environment where everyone talks the same language and everyone knows everybody else. So bringing some of that back to here and working out that actually Australia is quite forward-thinking and doing a lot of the things that our colleagues out in the US are talking about and doing as well. So data analytics and data virtualization. So big data, yeah, everyone's talking big data. The reality is the benefit of big data is not big data. The benefit of big data is the analysis. So there's no point. Everyone's rolling out Hadoop. Everyone's rolling out the big data platforms. There's no point unless you know what you want to use it for. And it's taken a while for people to know what they want to use it for. Now we're starting to get real use cases, particularly around things like agriculture, where you can get lots of feeds. I saw quite a neat demonstration around emergency services when there were hurricanes, tracking the hurricanes, and then sending the right emergency services people to the right places by doing real-time analysis of where it was heading and where you needed to put your emergency services. The data virtualization, so the amount of data that is being collected is just, it's impossible for some companies to put that in a cloud and then get any decent analytics out of it. So what we are seeing is people, particularly linked to IoT, where a lot of the analysis is actually being done on the end device, whether that be an end router, a mobile phone, whatever. If you can do some of the early analysis on those devices that are getting more and more powerful and then only send the results back. We had a good use case where one of the defense departments in one of the large countries had so much information coming in from their sonar and radar systems that there was no way they could send that back to their analytics system and get a real-time response to say whether there was a threat or not. So missiles coming in, you're sending it back to some data center, and then they're sending it back again, wasn't going to cut it. So they were doing a lot of the analysis locally on ships and then sending that analysis back, and that was quick enough to get it back. Some of the armies are using it for real-time intelligence when they've got the eyesight goggles and they're getting real analysis back from the battlefield. It's gone into the cloud. They're crunching the numbers and saying where people should move and where your friendly troops are, et cetera. So we're living the life of video games. APIs and microservices. So API is another overused term in microservices, but it is critical to some of this stuff to say if you're going to build things and deliver things quickly, you need to use things other people have already built, and you need to know how to plug them all together. And back to I've seen lots of Lego out there, it's the same analogy. It's much easier to build it using the Lego bricks than building it out of matchsticks. And the Internet of Things, again, we're seeing lots of different things around the Internet of Things. It's a big area to look at. A lot of it is really simple stuff using old protocols because it adds value. So we've already got a lot of this equipment sitting on things like buses and cars and old equipment that's out there, and we're sending relevant data back, and it's what you do with the data that becomes important, not necessarily creating this new IoT program. It's getting that data and getting it quickly and then doing something useful with it. Okay, so the other one was the whole data virtualization, data gravity. Everyone's looking at the clouds, we're selling compute. Now everyone's looking at, if we've got your data, it's really hard to move your data. So be careful where you put your data, because if you've got large amounts of data, it's not very easy to flip it around and move it from cloud to cloud. So the data gravity and data virtualization, if your cloud is in a central place, whether you keep it and you can buy the compute from anywhere, or whether you put it in the cloud, that's a big thing that's coming up now. Whoever's got your data has got the power. So there's a warning, but there's also a benefit there as well. So how do we construct our multi-cloud? So hopefully this isn't on our network. I know it's not. So these are the clouds that are currently part of the multi-cloud solution. We have a couple of others, and I'm sure you can, well, we've got one other that I'm sure you could work out if you thought about it, which one that will be. But each of those we picked for a particular reason, and the boxes there are pretty much saying what the reason is, and it's closely aligned. And SaaS, we've got a SaaS marketplace. We're onboarding lots more SaaS apps that we will then, from a multi-cloud point of view, join our SaaS and our infrastructure offerings so that you can buy out the SaaS. You can run things like Datadog. You can buy out our SaaS marketplace. You can run it on the servers. You can monitor them really quickly. It's really easy to spin up. It's really easy to start monitoring things. That's where we start to see where we've got some of the value add. Take the network, but then over the top, we've got service assurance, got security operations, we've got some of those things. And it's a one-stop shop. Come to us, you can get all of these clouds, plus network, security, and applications. You don't need to go to multiple places. So we built a product called Cloud Direct Connect, and this is to spin up quickly if you've already a Next IP customer. So you already got our MPLS network. This is an extension of our MPLS network into each of those clouds. The idea is all be fully automated, but not every cloud can accommodate that, believe it or not. So some of the premises we went into multi-cloud with, we're finding are not factual. Like, it seems really hard for certain cloud providers to do single sign-on. It's really hard for some of the cloud providers to do network automation. So a lot of our automation is up to them, and then they have got some manual steps. So this product, so ExpressRoute is one of the ones that we sell, and we'll have a demo of that. And I think we were the first ones in Australia to do ExpressRoute, and that is pretty much fully automated. So we can do that and spin that up really quickly. Graphic intensive. So this is just a view of the demo, and it shows that we've got virtual desktop. We'll spin up Connect Direct, and we'll link it to Sugar CRM system that's in another cloud. And I'm scared to press it now in case one more press. And I'm going to read from the notes, make sure I know what's happening as we go through. So this is actually us using, so we use Microsoft Azure Active Directory as well, and we'll show a demo of this, but this is us setting up ExpressRoute. So first of all, it's going into your tenancy within Azure and setting up your network in there. So you actually buy ExpressRoute through the Microsoft portal, not through Telstra. And as you can see here, we're just setting up the network. So on the network configuration, so some of the things you need to specify. So on-premise address space, in our case, the address space we're setting up, ExpressRoute to hit is our Cisco cloud within our data center. So the address space you're looking at there is Cisco cloud within our data center in Melbourne. The virtual network address space, which is available to assign to the Azure resources, so the other side of the network. Make sure there's no overlapping address spaces. So again, if you're using address spaces that aren't obviously publicly registered, you need to make sure that you're not using the same address space. And once the VNet is provisioned, where that's the part we got to, we click the option to create the gateway. It takes about 15 minutes to create the gateway. And after it's created, it'll provide the gateway's public IP address. Then you have to go into, for the geeks in the room, we thought we'd put the PowerShell up. So you have to go into PowerShell to create the ExpressRoute circuit in Azure. Check the Azure Online Help Guides for prerequisites, because there's a few. Authenticate using and add the Azure AD account. We've just gone through it. Import the required additional ExpressRoute PowerShell module. Run the command and get a list of link providers and show the location and bandwidth. And as you can see, we've picked Telstra, funnily enough. Telstra shows in the list as Melbourne or Sydney, or Melbourne and Sydney. And it shows the supported link speed, so up to 10 gig, I think we've got there. Once you confirm the dedicated circuit provisioning, it'll show the ExpressRoute service key, which is used in the creation of CDC, and the service provider provisioning status. Okay, so then the next part is going into the Telstra portal. So we've done the Microsoft part, we're now going to go into the Telstra multi-cloud portal and complete the connection. So as you can see, we'll use the Azure tenant account to log in to the portal. So you can log in with your Azure account now. And obviously, we're going to build on some of that identity because we've used Microsoft Azure AD as one of our identity providers. On the request page, you fill out the connection details, including the IP network FNN, the ExpressRoute service key, and the /28 subnet for the service interconnect. The service request status can be viewed from the services portal. And you can also use PowerShell to check the provisioning state. So you can flip back, and while you're doing this part, you can keep the other screen running and look at while the PowerShell's doing. Okay. Next part, test the link. So we're testing with a single VM on Azure subnet. The Azure VM is on the 10.10.10.0 remote subnet, and we can ping a local VM onto the Cisco Cloud Platform, which is on the 10.1.1.0. Local VM is a Linux machine running open source CRM called Sugar CRM. And it's as simple as that. I'll just wait for it to catch up with me. Obviously, it's not Scottish. We know we've cracked it when it's as fast as me speaking. So has anyone used this solution? Has anyone tried this? Anyone, Azure customer, is using Telstra networking? No? Anyone want to? Got your credit card? So hopefully here you'll see it spin up. I haven't watched the video, so hopefully it's a success one. Yep, provision. Yeah, I would do all the typing, but I don't think the team trusts me. And as you can see, we get a nice green, and it's all done. Okay, so the next one was looking at our our Portal Azure SSO sign-up. So, as I've said a few times, we're using Microsoft Azure's identity solution. When we looked at identity, there were a few areas that we wanted from an identity solution. Since then, there are additional things that are coming along that will help around from a security perspective and some other perspectives. But really, we wanted a solution that not only did brokerage for applications, we wanted to put it at the front end of our solution and allow other identities to be able to use it and federate. So we wanted to be an identity provider. So you're already an Express, you're already a 365 customer. There's a Premier AD product that gives you more capability, but you've already got an account at that point. If you're already an Azure customer, you already got an account. So for us, rather than us build on our own solution, we took the opportunity to say, Microsoft's already spent a lot of money on this. They spend a lot of money on securing this. They spend a lot of money integrating it with apps for single sign-on. And almost every company, or large, reasonable-sized company, has got an Active Directory that we can federate in, and then they can manage it themselves into our cloud. The other part is, if you're not a big company and you want the capabilities of Active Directory, then we can become the identity provider, and you can spin up an Azure Active Directory capability. So this is just recapping on what we did from the Azure Connect Direct demo. I don't think we need to spend much time on that. Yeah, so identity again, classic identity, straight from your AD, cloud federated identity, and a pure cloud identity. It's interesting. I think there's a video missing.
Questions?
It was supposed to be an Azure SSO video, but obviously I'm not going to play that. It's not there.
Ben,
or it didn't work.
Wake up. So I'm just bringing Ben de Quayle up to the stage. Ben is one of the lead technologists in the Azure Global team, which I'm a part of. So we're going to open it up to a couple of questions for you guys. But I'm going to be a good auctioneer and start with a dummy bid. Craig, something that was really interesting to me is...
Are you saying I'm the dummy?
No, trust me, I am.
I'll go with that.
He'll agree with you. How did Telstra avoid analysis paralysis?
I think that's back to the point of we just started. So we were in analysis paralysis, as we do. Anyone who's dealt with Telstra, we can get a lot of people in a room and have a lot of good discussions. We started it from the cloud space and said, here's what we want to do. Let's get on and do it. Yep. And then we worked it out from there. So yeah, a bit of a few tense conversations as we went through, but it highlighted some real facts because it gave people the impetus to say, you can't do this, you can't do that, and then we can work through it rather than it's never going to happen. So cool. Again, a key thing, start.
Yep.
And then people will tell you what they don't like, and then you can work out why they don't like it and how to solve it.
Just run, basically.
Yeah.
All right, you guys, you know I'm looking at you.
This is the part you dance.
Now, come on.
Actually, through that journey, what would you say was your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge, and one of the challenges you still got, is do we have the right resource, skill sets, and how do we retrain some of our resources to have culturally the mindset, but also the skills to go from being very vertically siloed in skill sets to more horizontally have to understand, might be an expert in one, but horizontally understand how it all hangs together and how it works. And getting over the fact that I don't want to hug 10 anymore, that a lot of the things that we have today that are physical are going to be virtual in tomorrow's world, and the skills to build, manage, and design those are different. So we're kind of still in various stages of that.
Yep.
In adopting that new technology, how do you, when you consider, because most of your customers have customer details,
Yep.
and confidentiality is key,
Yep.
key to this. How do you protect that?
Well, that's part of the analysis from an application point of view of how much information, if it's PII data, is it well protected where we have it within our own environment within Telstra? But when you look at most of the cloud providers, the security that they can provide and the number of tools and the accreditations they've got, actually, the more and more you look at it, the less and less risk. When you look at some of the government IRAP assessments for some of the clouds like Azure, you can see the government are doing some of those assessments with good reason to a level, and you're stepping into toe in the water. You're not going to put your crown jewels in there to begin with, but as you get more and more comfortable, it's still how you secure it. So having all the accreditations for the cloud, it's still back to do you have the right tool sets? Do you feed that back into your security operations environment? Are you comfortable that you can encrypt the data? Are you comfortable that they secure delete it? So a lot of that stuff that I said is in that ASD paper around how you pick cloud providers, some of those controls you put in place, and then how you monitor that over the top is how you get the comfort, the same way you do in your own. So a lot of people are thinking, actually, is it going to be more secure in the cloud environment than it is in my own data center? And I've heard some of the state government departments say exactly that. Their controls weren't that good. They moved it to cloud, to layer. It was managed for them, and they were getting better security out of that than they would in their own because they couldn't afford to build that level of security in.
I think extending on that from a Microsoft perspective, the ASD document that Craig spoke about, you then get to the Azure Trust Center, right? And you can specifically go into the Azure Trust Center and actually have a look at all of our assessments, everything we qualify for, how we handle things like PII, right? So we're very open about how we treat that, and we don't hide anything from anyone, and you can just log on or just go to the Azure site and go straight to the Trust Center, and you will see all that information there. Right? It's key to what we're trying to achieve.
It is a good point, particularly around SaaS apps, where we're putting additional controls that not everyone is across SaaS apps. So we're monitoring, we're putting the reverse proxies in, we're still doing some of the checks to see where they're being accessed from. So a lot of people are buying 365 and not putting any of that over the top. Where on our app marketplace, we've got some of the tools that put some of that security layer over the top of SaaS apps. So they're not they're out in the ether, forget about them. You still own the data, you're still accountable for it. If there's any breaches, it's still you that carries the can. So you need to have what level of comfort and protection you want over the top. And obviously taking into account what Microsoft will tell you, this is the level they've got, and that might be what you need. And then you might want to put stuff over the top, you might not. But that market is evolving quite quickly, and I know Microsoft are buying some of those companies and building some of that capability as well.
Yeah, and the stuff Travis is talking about in the Trust Center, we make it pretty clear what we're responsible for versus what the customer or someone like Telstra are responsible for. So we provide mechanisms, for example, secure networks, but we don't secure the networks always for you. You have to go in and do it yourself. And obviously, if you're talking about encryption of a database and it's a maybe PCI DSS compliance thing, we will provide the platform security and we'll tick what we're doing, but it'd be up to you to actually encrypt tables in the database as well. So there's a lot of kind of responsibility, joint responsibility, and we're pretty clear about what we cover.
Tools and the blueprints are there, but you are often
gotta tell
accountable for implementing them and managing them.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
When are your customers, Telstra customers, going to be able to provision Azure services through Telstra?
Very, very
We'll walk
soon.
away from that.
Very soon.
No comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't give you the date, but it's going to be very soon. It's going to be in months, not in.
Is there going to be limitations on what? It's the whole suite?
No, whole suite. One of the things that we decided to do was not to build a multi-cloud portal that would limit our customers' choice. So it was build a portal that allows you to buy all of the things that are available in the clouds that we integrate. So there's usually a reason the customer goes there. Why would we limit the choice? Because we might limit it to the part that you actually wanted it for. So yeah, that's a principle we've taken forward. We didn't want to re-engineer everyone's portal and create our own one. We've been down that path. It's an expensive path to go down, and there's not a lot of value in it. So it was more you drop into Azure, you can buy from Azure, but you obviously Telstra services over the top and single bill, that kind of thing.
Anyone else?
Anyone else with questions at all?
Right corner there. Anyone up there?
Can I ask one?
Yep.
On your cloud journey, what's the biggest benefit that you
So the biggest benefit you've seen in your cloud journey?
So, like the biggest benefit now is there's a couple actually. One is the business scene that we can move a lot faster than we could before. So it's not a monolithic, large, expensive project now. It's shorter, sharper projects particularly on the go-to-market clouds where we're utilizing capabilities that are already built. Whereas previously we'd look to build them ourselves, and even if we didn't and we got an off-the-shelf product, we'd buy it, we'd still have to spin up hardware, we'd still have to install it, we'd still have to configure it, we'd still have to do all of that. Now we can get them straight into you can configure and play quite quickly. At the same time, we can look at how we put some of those controls in, depending on the type of application, and follow that up. So we can very quickly deploy, particularly the new stuff, that we couldn't do before. It just didn't work.
One for you. You've been on your journey now, right?
No, it's
ongoing.
we're
journey.
always on
You're
the
on the
journey.
journey. You're still on the train. So, when your customers come to you and ask you about going to cloud,
Yep.
where do you start them on that entry point?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because whenever, so we go out and speak to a fair amount of customers as engineering, and because we're IT as well, we've done some of this stuff for real. A lot of them start in different places. So a lot of them haven't done a strategy. Back to the beginning. Why are you going to cloud? Because our board told us it was a good idea. We were told to do it. The boss said those kind of things. Not. So why? What's the benefit? What's your goals? How quickly do you want to get there? How much risk do you want to take? What's your workload placement? So it's really looking at what's your environment. Because when you go out to some of the large companies and they say, well, I've got a mainframe, I'm not going to move that. No, you're not. So don't pick that to start with. There's a mindset quite often of, let's pick the hardest thing and say it's not going to work on cloud. So don't pick the hardest thing.
Yep.
Pick the easy things that will get you some runs on the board and some value, and understand that some of the stuff you'll put in the corner, you'll automate, you'll keep for a long time. Make sure that you stop the bleed in the new stuff you put in the cloud, and you put the processes in, and you make sure you don't get the sticker shock by giving everyone access with a credit card and then you get the bill.
Yep.
So put some of those controls and practices in so you know people are spending, the procurement practices.
Yep.
So a lot of what we just went through is what we will tell people. These are the things you need to watch out for. Every company is different, and when we have the conversations, they've all got different requirements. They've got different security requirements. They've got different vendors and SIs, and we work around that.
Yep.
But the strategy part is why are you doing it? What's the purpose? How do you sell that back into your business, your board, that there's a benefit to doing it?
Yep.
And how do you get the money to do the upfront work so that you're not doing it project by project and wasting money, because every time you build a new tenancy, it's different. It costs more money because you haven't thought about it upfront.
So Ben, from a Microsoft perspective, sorry to wake you up.
No, you're fine.
What are we seeing? From a Microsoft perspective, where are we seeing a lot of our customers enter, and what are they coming to us about?
Look, I've said this a few times, there's a lot of solutions out there that we can do with the cloud. Some of them more complex than others. Some of the full lift and shift. Sometimes we're talking about re-architecting whole applications. Some of the high velocity stuff we're seeing, it's a low-hanging fruit. We probably saw this when we started doing virtualization too, right? We start looking at some of our thing like our cold data, data which is sort of expensive to keep, but we need to keep it somewhere, and we don't use it too much. Non-production environments, test and dev. I mean, I remember doing VMware, for example, 7 years ago as a customer, and we just went straight away, test and dev machines, let's get rid of those. Okay, my domain controllers,
Yep.
let's start moving those. The things which are simple, easy workloads, we're moving up to the cloud first. There are big, complex things. We're talking about customers going out and running production SAP, ERP systems in the cloud. But for the most part, what we really are seeing is those low-end workloads, the low-hanging fruit. We can see quick wins, quick cost reduction in a simple way for the majority of customers. We also had, up the back here, we had a question before.
Yeah, just wonder about the longer-term strategy for Telstra in relation to infrastructure. I know you're going through a process now of migrating a lot of clients from CSD to CSX.
Yep.
I mean, does CSX have a set still in the future, or are you going to be aligning more with the ecosystem in terms of
So at the moment, CSX has a future because our customers see a capability in it that has a future. And we've thought long and hard about that because of what I said. So it does have a future because there is still an area in the market and a segment that it fits, and it fits really well. Now, that's why we embarked on a multi-cloud strategy, and there are economies of scale in dealing with large providers, and there's a global footprint there. But yeah, it is there. It's going to stay there at the moment.
And look, from our perspective, things are going to be hybrid. They're going to be a mix of things you might have in a data center or colo where you own. And you talked about, for example, your AS400, your System Z. That stuff's not moving to the cloud anytime soon. And there's going to be stuff which may be fit for purpose on someone like what Telstra is doing and fit for purpose on Azure. It just depends. I mean, that's sort of what we sit at as Microsoft. I mean, since I started about 3 years ago, a lot of our documentation's been talking about, different kinds of ways of running it on premises in a partner environment or in Azure itself. And I think that is kind of the reality we see more and more.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people are starting with a hybrid type model with some of the managed service, VC type model where they do have on-prem and they're using the cloud for maybe DR or backup. So there's quite a few of those use cases where people are not quite willing to put everything into a public cloud, but they've got an on-prem. And as I said, we've got the same thing. We built an on-prem hybrid solution that we use our clouds, but it's our last resort now, not our first. So I think there's a confidence thing there as well, as we move forward, people are getting closer and closer to the model, but not everyone's willing to jump straight in for a number of reasons. Security is always one that people raise, which I'm not sure how real it necessarily is, but there's a comfort factor that people have still got access to the compute and the storage. They back up to the cloud. We've got things like Database Factory, which is not our business critical databases. They're an ideal candidate to move to database as a service because, again, they're not critical, but we need them, put them in a database as a service. So it is really understanding your business and saying which are the ones that you want to get up there so that you understand how your operating model is going to work, how your costing is going to work, and then as you progress, no different to any other technology adoption, you don't put your high-end business-critical systems on at day one, you mature to that, and that maturity takes a period of time depending on how mature you were when you started.
What about some of the complexity you see in customers around them getting their networks ready for these kind of new models? I mean, there's a lot of changes, a lot more intelligence they have to build into how they architect their own internal networks to connect to different
look,
providers.
including ourselves, when we went on this journey for our cloud network and our internal IT network, we built a new network because we had the fortune of we built a new data center, and the network we built is completely API driven. So there's a lot of SDN capability in there. It's IP driven. A lot of the security controls in there are NFV type applications as well. So we took the opportunity to look at our security models and our network models as part of this as well to say which ones are the best ones. So if you've got a legacy network that you've built out there, is this an opportunity to clean some of that up or use some of the networking capabilities to easily move? Because networking is a hard part. And again, for some of the clouds, it's hard because they don't allow you to bring your own IP address. From an IoT perspective, they don't support IPv6 end-to-end, so that's going to have to change. So there's a number of capabilities that not all the cloud providers, and each one is slightly different. And one of the learnings we've got from having to integrate all of these together and network them is we've got a good view of the pros and cons of all of the clouds that we've integrated, which is quite a unique view because not many people use all of those clouds and have had to integrate and run them. And then some of the things we want to do around IoT, and we've got a big push for obvious reasons to move people to IPv6 and as much as possible because the address range is for IPv4. So there are a lot of complexities still in this market, and it's very easy to pick the wrong thing and go so far down and then realize that it's not going to be fit for purpose. So the upfront work is really critical. Otherwise, you're going to realize halfway through the journey that you've potentially picked the wrong solution.
All right.
Any other questions from the floor?
Go on, you're desperate to ask another one. I can tell.
Anyone?
Last one.
Last one.
Yeah, about financials. How would you convince problem converting CapEx to OpEx, or is it them convincing you about it?
Yeah, there's a bit of that's an interesting discussion. I'm not sure how much I should really say, but
Converting CapEx to OpEx.
yeah, it's an interesting one, and there's an appetite to do it from finance because they realize the benefits of the OpEx model for certain things. So they're not adverse to it, but we comply with the international accounting rules, and we're very risk averse to make sure we comply well with rules. So it's a very fine line, and there's a lot of discussion from a lot of people in our finance area to make sure that we're doing the right thing in that space. So I'm willing to talk offline and tell you some of the pros and cons of each of the solutions.
Journey that your customer will go through.
Yeah, exactly right.
Exactly, and that's why some of the things around a CapEx model for a cloud that we've been working through, as well as the OpEx model, as well as where in the international accounting standards, certain things mean that you can't operationalize it, and some things mean you can't capitalize it based on who owns the asset, where it is, who manages it, and all those things. So yeah, there's a fair amount of work in making sure that you do the right things and it's the right thing for the business and you get the benefits of moving to the model. So yeah, that's a whole session in itself.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So also, please make
over.
sure you fill out. Oh, you got some other stuff, Trav? Or?
No, take over. Feel free.
Of course, from here. Look, can you please also make sure you fill out your evaluations? These are really important because it actually lets us tailor the presentations to you and bring things in, put them out. You didn't like Travis speaking, we'll get rid of him next time, for example.
Wouldn't be the first one.
I'll do that in a sec. But put them in, please do. Make comments, do all this kind of stuff. As well as that, there is a whole lot. This is my third presentation now, so I know this by heart. There's a whole lot of actual things online. You can go and continue learning after Ignite and get access to more Academy stuff. It's all free online training. Every single session you see here during Ignite is recorded, and the decks are made available. You can get all that through channel9.msdn.com. And of course, don't forget, evaluate, evaluate, evaluate. And I hope it was useful today for you.
I hope so too.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.